All right, so you're here because, let's be honest, keeping up with Path of Exile 2's changes can feel like a full-time job sometimes, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I feel that.
Especially with an update as big as Dawn of the Hunt coming up.
Hmm.
I mean, seriously, point 2.0, this is going to be huge.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And sifting through all those patch notes and forum posts.
Exactly. No one has time for that.
Right.
So that's what we're here for. We went straight to the source, the Developers Tavern Talk with Jonathan and Mark, and we're going to break it all down for you.
Think of this as your, like, super concentrated Dawn of the Hunt update cheat sheet.
Exactly. We're going to lay out what's actually important, what's changing, why it matters, all that good stuff.
And it's not just going to be like a dry rundown of facts either. We're going deep on the new stuff, obviously the Huntress, spectres, all that.
Of course.
But also those under the hood changes, balance tweaks, quality of life things, even some technical stuff.
We're going to make sure you actually understand what's coming, not just
Oh,
know about it.
yeah, absolutely. So I guess first things first, timeline-wise, when can people actually expect to jump into Dawn of the Hunt?
Well, the full patch notes are dropping later this week, actually.
Oh, nice.
Keep an eye out. Thursday, New Zealand time. So that's probably going to be Wednesday for most of you guys.
Gotcha. So that's when the really detailed stuff comes out.
Yeah, exactly. But it's important to remember that this isn't just about new content. There's some serious balance adjustments coming too.
Yeah, definitely game-changing stuff, potentially.
For sure. And while we're on the topic of new stuff, I mean, obviously the Huntress is coming,
Right, huge.
which a lot of people have been waiting for. And we're also getting spectres, which is going to be a whole new way to build minion characters.
Oh yeah, raising defeated enemies as your own little army. That's super cool.
Right. And for you exploration fans out there, 7 brand new maps are being added to the Atlas.
Whoa, 7 new maps. That's a lot to explore.
Yeah, it is. And if you're like me and you love chasing that sweet loot, they're going to be around 100 new unique items.
Wow. 100. That's a lot of new loot to grind for.
Oh yeah, this update is packed. But let's actually get into some of the nitty-gritty, the mechanics and changes that are happening under the hood.
Yeah, definitely. Let's start with blocking. What are they doing with that?
So right now, blocking is really good for boss fights, but not so much for general gameplay.
Right, it's kind of a niche defensive tool.
Yeah, and the developers want to make it more reliable and consistent throughout the whole game, not just for bosses.
So you're saying they want to make it more of an all-around defensive option.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they specifically talked about needing to handle multiple attackers better, which makes me think they're aiming for a more active blocking style.
Interesting. Like instead of just holding up your shield and hoping for the best.
Yeah, more engaging, for sure. And they're also reworking the block animation so it feels smoother and more responsive.
Nice. That's always good to hear. And speaking of feeling smoother, what about the game's difficulty overall? Are they changing that up at all?
Yeah, they're moving away from just linearly scaling monster life as you progress.
Oh, so no more enemies just having ridiculous amounts of HP in later areas.
Right? They're going for a more layered approach, with multiple sources of randomness influencing difficulty.
Okay, so it's going to be more about like different mechanics and challenges, not just HP bloat.
Yeah, exactly. And they're also fine-tuning how those mechanics interact so you don't get hit with, like, crazy difficulty spikes from overlapping stuff.
That's good. I've definitely had moments where I felt like the game just threw everything at me at once.
Yeah, for sure. And to go along with this, they're introducing a new toughness stat to replace the linear life scaling.
Toughness, huh? What's that all about?
It's basically a way to make enemies tougher without just giving them insane amounts of HP. It'll have diminishing returns, so it's not just going to scale infinitely.
So it'll make the game challenging, but hopefully in a fairer, more balanced way.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And they're applying the same philosophy to rewards and item rarity, too. They want progression to feel smoother and less like a total crapshoot.
I like that it sounds like they're really focusing on making the overall experience less volatile, both in terms of difficulty and rewards.
For sure. And while we're talking about rewards, let's talk about Magic Find.
Oh, yeah, that's always a hot topic.
Definitely. So Magic Find is getting nerfed.
Really? Huh? How much are we talking?
It's currently boosting rare currency drops by like 40 to 50%, which is a lot.
Yeah, that is pretty significant. So are they just like slashing all Magic Find bonuses across the board?
Not exactly. They're targeting the really extreme cases like the Yule Shield that gives you a ridiculous 240% increased rarity.
Wow, 240%? That's insane. So those kinds of builds are basically getting shut down.
Pretty much. They're also adjusting the diminishing returns on Magic Find, so stacking tons of it won't be as effective.
So it's still going to be a factor, but it sounds like it'll be more balanced and in line with other itemization choices.
Exactly. And they did say they might tweak it more in the future based on how it plays out during early access.
Makes sense. It's a complex system, so it'll probably take some fine-tuning.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to something that's going to be a huge quality of life improvement, the new map objectives display.
Oh, yeah, I saw people talking about that online. What's that all about?
So you know how sometimes it's not totally clear what you need to do to complete a map?
Yeah, sometimes, especially with all the different league mechanics and stuff.
Right, well now there's going to be a UI element in the top right corner that clearly shows you the objectives for that map.
Oh, that's so much better than having to guess or look it up online.
I know, right? It'll mostly be killing rare monsters in non-boss maps, and then obviously killing the boss in boss maps.
Makes sense. So will there be any other objectives, or is it just those two?
They did consider other options, but they decided that killing rares just fits the core gameplay loop best.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's what you're already doing most of the time anyway.
Exactly. But they are adding an extra content display that shows any optional objectives in a map.
Okay, so you can still see what else is available if you want to do more than just the bare minimum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about bosses, specifically their health pools and how accessible they are.
Ooh, yeah. This is something I'm always curious about, especially early game.
We'll get this. The end bosses in the previous version actually had double their intended health.
What, really? So they were way tougher than they were supposed to be.
Yeah, totally unintentional. They fixed it now, though.
Good to hear. And they're also having the base HP of tier 0 bosses?
Yep, making those early fights more manageable for a wider range of builds.
Nice. That'll definitely help newer players or people trying out less meta builds.
For sure. And for those of you who are into the tougher stuff, the pinnacle bosses are getting some changes too.
Okay, what's happening with them?
So first of all, they're doubling the frequency of encountering them, so you can expect to see them roughly every 1 in 30 maps.
Oh, wow. That's a lot more often than before.
Yeah, it is. And here's the big one. All unique items will now have a chance to drop from difficulty 0 pinnacle bosses.
What, really? Even at the lower difficulty?
Yeah, of course, the drop rate will be lower than at higher tiers, but it's still a huge opportunity.
Yeah, definitely gives people more incentive to tackle those bosses early on.
Exactly. Now let's talk about a specific unique item that's been causing quite a stir temporalis.
Oh, yeah, I've heard some crazy things about that one. What's the deal?
It's getting a major nerf.
Really? How major are we talking?
Well, for starters, its drop rate is being reduced by about 10 times.
10 times? Wow, they're not messing around.
Nope. And the cooldown reduction it gives is also being toned down. It won't fully reset skills like Blink anymore.
So those insane infinite blink builds are gone.
Yeah, pretty much. It was just too strong. They had to bring it in line.
Makes sense. Speaking of things that can be frustrating, what about those on-death effects from monsters?
Yeah, those can be annoying sometimes.
Especially the ones that feel unavoidable.
Right. Well, the developers are actually really receptive to feedback on this. They're willing to adjust or even remove on-death effects that feel unfair.
Oh, that's good to hear. So they're not just going to ignore player complaints.
Nope. They're also focusing on making loot and death effects visually distinct so you don't miss out on items in the chaos.
Yeah, I've definitely had times where I'm like, wait, did something drop there or is that just an explosion?
Totally. And they specifically mentioned monsters like bloaters, which will have clear telegraphs before they explode.
Okay, so you'll have a chance to react and get out of the way.
Exactly. It's all about making those mechanics feel fairer and less punishing.
I like that it shows they're really thinking about the player experience. Now, what about the current balance of builds? Like, are there any big changes coming to how certain playstyles function?
Well, crit builds are definitely strong right now,
Yeah, I've noticed that they seem to be pretty dominant.
but the developers aren't planning any major changes to crit in this update. It's not their top priority right now.
Interesting. So they're not seeing it as like a huge problem that needs immediate fixing?
Not yet. They are, however, looking at elemental effects like ignite and bleed.
Okay, so they're focusing on ailments more than crit right now.
Yeah, they want to keep things simple. So ailments are currently scaling with hit damage.
Makes sense. That's definitely easier to understand than some other ailment systems I've seen in games.
Right. And they're fixing some specific skill interactions that were causing problems, like Hammer of the Gods applying crazy strong bleeds.
Yeah, I've heard about that. It sounds pretty broken.
It was. They might also adjust how ailments scale in the future to better support ailment-focused builds.
Okay, so while crit's not on the chopping block just yet, ailments are definitely getting some attention.
Exactly. Now let's get to one of the most exciting new features, spectres.
Oh yeah, this is the big one for all the summoners out there.
Definitely. So with spectres, you can raise defeated monsters as your minions, but it costs spirit to do so.
So it's kind of like a trade-off. You get more minions, but you have to manage your spirit carefully.
Exactly. And the cost depends on the monster's experience value and loot rarity. So rarer monsters will cost more.
Makes sense. Tougher monsters should be more expensive to summon.
Right. But there is a limit. You can't raise bosses as specters.
Okay, so no summoning the Shaper to fight for you?
Uh-huh. No, unfortunately. But they are planning to add the ability to unbind specters in a future update.
That's good to know. It'll give players more control over their spectral army.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there's another new mechanic that lets you control monsters, but in a different way, Tame Beast.
Tame Beast. Huh. Sounds interesting. What's that all about?
It basically lets you temporarily convert monsters into allies.
Oh, wow. So you can have them fight alongside you for a bit.
Yep. But they had to make some balance changes to monster affixes. For example, beasts with invulnerability auras can't be tamed.
That makes sense. Otherwise, you could have invincible allies running around.
Right. And visually, it might be a little messy at first to tell tamed beasts from regular enemies.
Yeah, I can see how that could be confusing.
But they're working on improving that in future updates. And most importantly, tamed beasts can't damage you.
Good to know. No accidental team kills.
Exactly. Now, speaking of new things to explore, we're getting 7 new maps in this update.
7? That's a lot of new ground to cover.
It is. And there's also a new tablet item that lets you irradiate a map after you've cleared it.
Irradiate? What does that do?
It basically lets you run the map again, but with different modifiers or challenges.
Oh, cool. So it adds replay value to maps you've already completed.
Exactly. And Rogue Exiles were making a comeback.
Oh, yeah. Those guys are tough.
They'll be able to appear in any map, starting from Act 2 onwards, with a chance of 1 in 12.
So they're not just limited to specific areas anymore.
Nope. And their difficulty will scale with the map tier, so they'll always be a challenge.
Oh, that's going to keep things interesting for sure. Now let's move on to something all the crafting enthusiasts are going to love: recombinators.
Yeah, this is a big new crafting system coming in 0.2.0.
So what are they all about? How do they work?
The idea is that you can use them to combine items that already have some good modifiers on them.
Okay, so instead of starting from scratch, you can use items you've already found.
Exactly. Let's say you have an item with like 3 or 4 really good affixes. You can use a Recombinator to try and get even better ones.
And then you could use an exalted orb to fill in the remaining slots.
Right, but the developers have said that Recombinators aren't meant for crafting those perfect 6 Tier 1 mod items.
So it's more about making good use of the items you find, rather than just grinding for currency.
Yeah, it's supposed to encourage players to actually engage with the items they get.
I like that it could really change how people approach gearing up their characters.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, let's briefly go over the Ascendancy classes. Are there any big changes there?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they're doing with those.
Okay, so for the Amazon, their critical strike node is getting tweaked. It'll now grant base crit chance based on your excess accuracy.
So if you have more accuracy than you need to hit enemies, it'll convert into crit chance.
Exactly. And for the Ritualist, their extra ring slots will interact with the Ingenuity Keystone passive.
Oh, right. They get to equip more rings than other classes.
Yeah, but Ingenuity is getting nerfed in this update, so it might not be as strong as it used to be.
So ritualist builds might need to adapt their strategies a bit.
Yeah, probably. Now, the Tactician supporting Fire Minion is actually not a separate minion.
What? So it's not like a pet that follows you around.
Nope, it's more like a skill that scales with your minion modifiers.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's kind of like a phantom minion.
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah.
And for the Smith of Kitava, their temper weapon skill now requires you to hit enemies to charge it.
So it's more active than before.
Yeah, and their manifest weapon skill will create a copy of your equipped weapon to fight alongside you.
Ooh, that sounds pretty cool, like a temporary second weapon.
Right. And lastly, for the Lich, their Eternal Life node is really powerful, but it's not meant to make you completely immortal.
So you can't just stand in anything and expect to survive.
Nope. You still need to be careful, but it's a great defensive option.
Definitely. All right, now let's talk about those quality of life improvements, because those are always appreciated.
Oh, yeah, those are the best. So for all you socket enthusiasts out there, the drop rates for Perfect and Greater Jeweler's orbs are being increased.
Nice. That'll make crafting a lot easier.
And even better, the 6-link orb will now guarantee a 6-link without needing a 5-link first.
Wow. That's a huge time saver.
I know, right? No more tedious linking process.
Definitely a welcome change. What about the UI? Are there any improvements there?
Yeah, they're making the passive skill tree search more intuitive, and they're improving player search and filtering too.
Oh, that's good. Especially for people who play in groups or guilds.
Yeah, and of course there'll be more item filter improvements.
Always good to have more control over your loot filter.
Now, for the tech stuff, the hybrid lockstep networking solution is still in development.
So no word on when that's coming.
Not yet, but they are working on API improvements, which will eventually allow us to view characters on the website.
Oh, that'll be cool to see your character stats and stuff online.
And private leagues are coming too, but not right away.
Okay, so they'll be added later during early access.
Yeah, and for hardcore players, if your character dies, you'll be moved to the non-hardcore Dawn of the Hunt League.
Not to the standard league.
Nope, just to the non-hardcore version of the new league.
Gotcha. That's good to know. And what about visual clarity? Are they doing anything to improve that?
Yes, definitely. The delirium fog is being reduced by 50%.
Oh, thank goodness that stuff was so thick.
I know, right? And they're working on making magic and rare monsters more visually distinct without relying on auras,
Yeah, those can get overwhelming sometimes.
for sure. And they're also addressing issues with monster pushback mechanics.
Yeah, this can be really annoying when you're trying to position yourself.
They can. So overall, a lot of quality of life improvements coming in this update.
Sounds like it. It seems like they're really listening to player feedback and trying to make the game as enjoyable as possible.
Yeah, they are. And before we wrap up, they did mention a couple of interesting predictions.
Oh, yeah. What were those?
They think the Huntress is going to be the most popular class at launch. Maybe around 70% of players will choose her.
Wow, that's a lot. I guess people are really excited about that new playstyle.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah.
And they also think the Ritualist or the Amazon will be the next most popular.
Interesting. I wonder which one will come out on top.
Only time will tell. So yeah, that's pretty much everything we got from the Tavern Talk.
Wow, that's a lot of information. It's going to be a huge update.
It is, yeah. Dawn of the Hunt is bringing some serious changes to Path of Exile, too.
From core mechanics to new content and quality of life improvements, it's going to shake things up for sure.
What are you most excited about personally?
That's a tough one. I think I'm most intrigued by the spectres. They seem like they could lead to some really interesting builds.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I'm really curious to see how the new maps and unique items change the game.
Me too. And with all these balance changes, it's going to be interesting to see how the meta evolves.
Definitely. Some builds might rise to the top, others might fall by the wayside.
And who knows what kind of crazy new strategies people will come up with.
It's an exciting time to be a Path of Exile 2 player, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Dawn of the Hunt.
We'll catch you next time. Until then, keep those axes sharp, and may your loot be plentiful.
Happy hunting, everyone.